Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Gave it right back to my middle school bully. I posted about this elsewhere but can't find it. Anyway, this was ages ago. I was in 6th or 7th grade, and it was PE class. I was mindlessly bouncing one of those red 4-square balls against a wall, because the other options were basketball and volleyball, both of which I wasn't a fan of. That was when an 8th grade bully walked by with his girlfriend. I had never seen this guy before, but I was small for my age and not highly athletic, so for whatever reason known only to middle school bullies, he singled me out. He grabbed my ball and bounced it against my head a few times, then turned and drop-kicked it way out into a field. His girlfriend told him to stop and leave me alone, so he laughed and they kept walking past, leaving me feeling helpless and embarrassed and pissed off. So I ran out into the field to retrieve the ball, and brought it back to where I had been. By now the bully was about 10 yards away, walking away from me. I had no idea if it would work, but I took aim, pointing at him with one arm, and lofted the ball as hard as I could. Whatever angels watch over small, bullied kids in middle school took control of the ball and guided it straight to the middle of that kid's back. It made a loud POOM and he was almost knocked onto his face. Completely stunned, he turned around, jaw dropped. Of course he ran and told a yard duty, so we both got an hour of detention. Worth it. Story 2. An oldie but a goodie. Back in the days of the Ford Model T, heat in the cabin of the car was provided by the exhaust manifold. Air from behind the radiator passed through a metal tube attached to the manifold and then through the firewall to provide some warmth for the driver and passengers. My grandfather told me a story which was the basis of this revenge that had to do with putting stinky cheese inside of the Model T heater tube. Alfred, not real name, was the type of fellow who would siphon your gas and then ask your girlfriend to go out for a ride. Alfred had a muscle car, you know the type. It was always a race between the fuel gauge and the speedometer. His car required premium gasoline, high octane, which was more expensive, and he knew which other cars in the school parking lot used the same fuel. On game nights, he would siphon 5 gallons from one car and pour it into his gas tank, then go and hit another car until either the basketball game ended or someone noticed his thievery. One Friday evening, while the pep band was packing up, he asked my girl if she wanted a ride home. She and I had argued about something or another and she told Alfred sure, but let's stop for pizza. I saw Alfred's car in the lot of Pizza the Hut and noticed the couple in the window. Good old Alfred saw me, grinned and flipped me off. I headed to the local purveyor of fine foods to purchase supplies for my revenge. During the next week's basketball game, I saw Alfred and my ex sitting in the student section. I approached the band director and asked if I might be allowed to visit the men's room and was given permission. Outside in the parking lot, I found Alfred's pride and joy, his delusion of manhood, his compensation for, well, you get it, and opened the hood. I didn't rearrange the spark plug wires or steal his distributor rotor or do any damage to the car. I simply opened 2 cans of flat anchovy fillets and placed the contents on the exhaust manifolds of his big block V8 engine and coated the thing with the olive oil in which the fillets had been packed. I closed the hood, went inside, washed my hands and returned to my place in the pep band. Over the distance between the gymnasium parking lot and the home of Pizza the Hut, the anchovies started to cook, and then to burn, creating a rather vile stench. The following Monday, when Alfred drove his still stinky car into the school parking lot, many noses were held and snide. Story 3. Parking spot neighbors didn't hold the elevator door for me, so now I make sure to always get to the lift before them and make it stop at every floor after I get out. I live in an apartment building, and there's one elevator for the apartments in our part of the building. One time I was parking up as people in the apartment next to me were, and they got to the elevator before me. They saw me walk towards the door as they were getting in, and there is maybe a 10-meter distance between our parking spot and the elevator. I could literally see them in the elevator as the door closed. We park on the 3rd basement level and there's 5 above ground floors. Now every time I see them park up, I rush to the elevator before they can get in and make sure that the elevator stops at every floor above me and then below me before it gets back down to them. I also make sure to park as close to the line dividing us as possible. Story 4. Middle manager learns her lesson. Almost 20 years ago I pushed carts for a regional business with around 150 employees. Obviously my main job was pushing carts, but I also helped customers or did various cleaning as well as cashiering. Often I would be gathering carts and a customer would ask for assistance in finding something. The store policy was to generally bring customer to the item. One busy day there was a shortage of carts when a customer asked for help finding something. I was helping them when the head cashier called me over the radio asking me to bring in more carts. Once I finished with the customer I responded and she told me that my job was to gather carts. I told her I would strictly do that from now on. That's when the store manager came into the conversation on the radio and told her that my responsibilities also included helping the customer. It was funny hearing her get out back in place, especially knowing that probably 20 to 30 other department managers and employees were probably listening to the conversation. Story 5. Non-profit client lies about being a cop and is rude and gets rejected for temporary aid. In the late 90s/early 00s, my wife and I worked in social work at homeless shelters, food pantries, LGBT centers, non-profits, etc. We eventually left social work and got into the tech field. We still had the desire to help people and would volunteer at places or write grants or do side jobs for non-profits. Flash forward to spring of 2021, I was going through some depression as my wife had been diagnosed with ALS and the pandemic took a toll on mental health for other reasons. I decided to take a side gig for a non-profit as I knew the executive director. The side gig was remote and something I could do evenings or weekends after my regular remote tech job. I took the job hoping to cheer myself up, which did help me, but I dealt with occasional rude clients. One client in particular was quite memorable. The non-profit was doing a program that was temporarily giving aid to people who lost loved ones to COVID by providing them things like grocery gift cards, clothing, household supplies, and donations to cover things like smaller bills like utilities or car payments. Churches, other non-profits, and community organizations would refer people to us. My job involved doing intake for the clients and talking with them via a VoIP program or Microsoft Teams to see how we could help them and how they would go about setting up appointments for them to go into the office to receive gift cards, household supplies, and utility bills so staff could review and help them pay the bills. Our program didn't offer rent or mortgage assistance. The director would send me a list of people with their personal details which included how they got referred to us. The referrals also listed the employment status of people and if they were employed there was a line to list their employer. One evening, I started my evening shift and looked through the first client, which was a woman in her early 50s. Husband had died due to COVID 2 months before and their church referred her to us. She listed the city's police department as her employer, but didn't state her position. I call the number and she answers, City PD Homicide. This is Detective Leslie Garrison, fake name. I introduce myself and my position with the non-profit. She then states that she was referred to us by the church. I then go through a list of things to ask about clients in regards to what specific needs they have program can help them. She tells me she needs help paying the mortgage because she is down to one income, and she also states that her husband didn't have life insurance and didn't have a pension because he worked as a mechanic at small auto shop. I feel bad for her and explain that our program at the time couldn't assist with rent or mortgage, but we could assist with utility bills, food/groceries, and other household supplies. She got pissy with me and said it was lame that we couldn't help her with a mortgage, and she started going off about how people are homeless because my employer and other non-profits only give band-aid solutions. The non-profit did have a resource list of government agencies and bigger non-profits that assist with more in-depth needs. I tried to tell her that and she again went off on me and said that she was going to end up homeless because nobody is willing to really help her. She said that she was fucked because we couldn't help her with her mortgage. I let her go on being nasty and venting, in hopes of de-escalating the situation. While she's doing that, I look up the city's online transparency portal which lists employee salaries. I searched the client's name and nothing came up with her name. I figure she lied on her referral. I then asked if she would like me to set up a follow-up call with our program director and possibly give her other forms of assistance. She's again rude and says something along the lines, "Well, I guess I could at least get help paying my electricity bill, since your non-profit doesn't actually want to help me." The call ends, I write up the notes detailing everything she said and then I do a Microsoft Teams call with the director. I show him her referral which listed her employer as the city's police department and I mentioned that she identified herself as a homicide detective. I mention the nastiness and then I tell him how the transparency portal has no listing of an employee with her name. He's not too thrilled by what she has done. He eventually sends her an email stating that due to her nastiness, the non-profit wouldn't move forward with giving her assistance. The director later told me that if she hadn't lied about being a cop/working for the city's police department, he would have been willing to do a follow-up call with her even though she was nasty. He said sometimes he believes people are awful because of the stress that they are going through. I agreed with them. But, we also felt her lie about being a cop was crappy even though both of us have mixed views on law enforcement. He later spoke to the pastor who said that the woman works as a waitress at a restaurant. There's nothing wrong with that line of work. If she had told the truth about her job and hadn't been a nasty cunt, we would have been willing to help her out a bit. TLDR woman who contacts a non-profit lies about being a cop and is rude about the assistance program. The director of non-profit decides not to assist her. Story 6. Went full snitch. So a few months ago I discovered that my wife had been secretly using/addicted to meth. Every time I caught her out she swore it was the last time she would touch the shit. But it happened again and again. Breaking my heart. The fights got worse every time. To the point where I exploded during the fight and punched a wall and broke my hand. I found out who was dealing to her and left the house to commit acts of violence on anyone in that house. But fuck me, my hand hurt. How much fighting could I do with my dominant hand broken? Plus I have a record and would have ended up in prison. So I decided while I sat in my car in the cunt's driveway I was going to dob in the dealer. And that is exactly what I did. Lucky I didn't go in because my hand was destroyed and the next day I was in for emergency surgery to have a whole bunch of metal out in. I even took part in a controlled buy monitored by the detectives. The dog cunt is now sitting in a prison cell waiting for sentencing. I get that he never forced her to buy but he was the person who introduced her to it and I threatened him to stop dealing with her but he didn't stop. So I stopped the cunt. It was not an easy decision to make but the way I see it was either the police take him off the streets and stop poisoning our community or I take him off the streets and miss my children growing up. Fucking meth dealers can all die a slow and painful death. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.